Chapter 6. The Diamond Mines. Not very long after this, a very exciting thing happened. Not only Sarah, but the entire school found it exciting, and made it the chief subject of conversation for weeks after it occurred. In one of his letters, Captain Crewe told a most interesting story. A friend, who had been at school with him when he was a boy, had unexpectedly come to see him in India. He was the owner of a large tract of land upon which diamonds had been found, and he was engaged in developing the mines. If all went as was confidently expected, he would become possessed of such wealth as it made one dizzy to think of. And because he was fond of the friend of his school days, he had given him an opportunity to share in this enormous fortune by becoming a partner in his scheme. This, at least, was what Sarah gathered from his letters. It is true that any other business scheme, however magnificent, would have had but small attraction for her or for the schoolroom. But diamond mines sounded so like the Arabian Nights that no one could be indifferent. Sarah thought them enchanting, and painted pictures for Ermengarde and Lottie of labyrinthine passages in the bowels of the earth, where sparkling stones studded the walls and roofs and ceilings, and strange dark men dug them out with heavy picks. Ermengarde delighted in the story, and Lottie insisted on its being retold to her every evening. Lavinia was very spiteful about it, and told Jessie that she didn't believe such things as diamond mines existed. "My mamma has a diamond ring which cost £40, she said, "and it's not a big one either. If there were mines full of diamonds, people would be so rich it would be ridiculous. Perhaps Sarah will be so rich she will be ridiculous," giggled Jessie. "She's ridiculous without being rich," Lavinia sniffed. "I believe you hate her," said Jessie. "No, I don't," snapped Lavinia. "But I don't believe in mines full of diamonds." "Well, people have got to get them from somewhere," said Jessie. "Lavinia," with a new giggle, "what do you think Gertrude says?" "I don't know, I'm sure. And I don't care if it's something more about that everlasting Sarah." "Well, it is. One of her pretends is that she is a princess. She plays it all the time, even in school. She says it makes her learn her lessons better. She wants Ermengarde to be one too, but Ermengarde says she is too fat." "She is too fat," said Lavinia, "and Sarah is too thin." Naturally, Jessie giggled again. "She says it has nothing to do with what you look like or what you have. It has only to do with what you think of and what you do." "I suppose she thinks she could be a princess if she was a beggar," said Lavinia. "Let us begin to call her Your Royal Highness." Lessons for the day were over, and they were sitting before the schoolroom fire, enjoying the time they liked best. It was the time when Miss Minchin and Miss Amelia were taking their tea in the sitting-room, sacred to themselves. At this hour a great deal of talking was done, and a great many secrets changed hands, particularly if the younger pupils behaved themselves well and did not squabble or run about noisily, which it must be confessed they usually did. When they made an uproar, the older girls usually interfered with scolding and shakes. They were expected to keep order, and there was danger that if they did not, Miss Minchin or Miss Amelia would appear and put an end to festivities. Even as Lavinia spoke, the door opened, and Sarah entered with Lottie, whose habit was to trot everywhere after her like a little dog. "There she is, with that horrid child," exclaimed Lavinia in a whisper. "If she's so fond of her, why doesn't she keep her in her own room? She'll begin howling about something in 5 minutes." It happened that Lottie had been seized with a sudden desire to play in the schoolroom, and had begged her adopted parent to come with her. She joined a group of little ones who were playing in a corner. Sarah curled herself up in the window seat, opened a book, and began to read. It was a book about the French Revolution, and she was soon lost in a harrowing picture of the prisoners in the Bastille. Men who had spent so many years in dungeons that when they were dragged out by those who rescued them, their long grey hair and beards almost hid their faces, and they had forgotten that an outside world existed at all, and were like beings in a dream. She was so far away from the schoolroom that it was not agreeable to be dragged back suddenly by a howl from Lottie. Never did she find anything so difficult as to keep herself from losing her temper when she was suddenly disturbed while absorbed in a book. People who are fond of books know the feeling of irritation which sweeps over them at such a moment. The temptation to be unreasonable and snappish is one not easy to manage. "It makes me feel as if someone had hit me," Sarah had told Ermengarde once in confidence, "and as if I want to hit back. I have to remember things quickly to keep from saying something ill-tempered." She had to remember things quickly when she laid her book on the window seat and jumped down from her comfortable corner. Lottie had been sliding across the schoolroom floor, and, having first irritated Lavinia and Jessie by making a noise, had ended by falling down and hurting her fat knee. She was screaming and dancing up and down in the midst of a group of friends and enemies, who were alternately coaxing and scolding her. "Stop this minute, you cry-baby! Stop this minute!" Lavinia commanded. "I'm not a cry-baby! I'm not!" wailed Lottie. "Sarah! Sarah!" "If she doesn't stop, Miss Minchin will hear her," cried Jessie. "Lottie, darling, I'll give you a penny." "I don't want your penny," sobbed Lottie, and she looked down at the fat knee and, seeing a drop of blood on it, burst forth again. Sarah flew across the room and, kneeling down, put her arms round her. "Now, Lottie," she said, "you promised Sarah." "She said I was a cry-baby," wept Lottie. Sarah patted her, but spoke in the steady voice Lottie knew. "But if you cry, you will be one, Lottie pet. You promised." Lottie remembered that she had promised, but she preferred to lift up her voice. "I haven't any mamma," she proclaimed. "I haven't a bit of mamma." "Yes, you have," said Sarah cheerfully. "Have you forgotten? Don't you know that Sarah is your mamma? Don't you want Sarah for your mamma?" Lottie cuddled up to her with a consoled sniff. "Come and sit in the window seat with me," Sarah went on, "and I'll whisper a story to you." "Will you?" whimpered Lottie. "Will you tell me about the diamond mines?" "The diamond mines?" broke out Lavinia. "Nasty little spoiled thing! I should like to slap her." Sarah got up quickly on her feet. It must be remembered that she had been very deeply absorbed in the book about the Bastille, and she had had to recall several things rapidly when she realised that she must go and take care of her adopted child. She was not an angel, and she was not fond of Lavinia. "Well," she said with some fire, "I should like to slap you, but I don't want to slap you," restraining herself. At least, I both want to slap you and I should like to slap you. But I won't slap you. We are not little gutter children. We are both old enough to know better. Here was Lavinia's opportunity. "Ah, yes, your Royal Highness," she said. "We are princesses, I believe. At least one of us is. The school ought to be very fashionable now Miss Minchin has a princess for a pupil." Sarah started toward her. She looked as if she were going to box her ears. Perhaps she was. Her trick of pretending things was the joy of her life. She never spoke of it to girls she was not fond of. Her new pretend about being a princess was very near to her heart, and she was shy and sensitive about it. She had meant it to be rather a secret, and here was Lavinia deriding it before nearly all the school. She felt the blood rush up into her face and tingle in her ears. She only just saved herself. If you were a princess, you did not fly into rages. Her hand dropped, and she stood quite still a moment. When she spoke, it was in a quiet, steady voice. She held her head up, and everybody listened to her. "It's true," she said. "Sometimes I do pretend I am a princess. I pretend I am a princess so that I can try and behave like one." Lavinia could not think of exactly the right thing to say. Several times she had found that she could not think of a satisfactory reply when she was dealing with Sarah. The reason for this was that somehow the rest always seemed to be vaguely in sympathy with her opponent. She saw now that they were pricking up their ears interestedly. The truth was they liked princesses, and they all hoped they might hear something more definite about this one, and drew nearer Sarah accordingly. Lavinia could only invent one remark, and it fell rather flat. "Dear me," she said. "I hope when you ascend the throne you won't forget us." "I won't," said Sarah, and she did not utter another word, but stood quite still, and stared at her steadily, as she saw her take Jessie's arm and turn away. After this, the girls who were jealous of her used to speak of her as Princess Sarah, whenever they wished to be particularly disdainful, and those who were fond of her gave her the name among themselves as a term of affection. No one called her Princess instead of Sarah, but her adorers were much pleased with the picturesqueness and grandeur of the title, and Miss Minchin, hearing of it, mentioned it more than once to visiting parents, feeling that it rather suggested a sort of royal boarding school. To Becky it seemed the most appropriate thing in the world. The acquaintance begun on the foggy afternoon when she had jumped up terrified from her sleep in the comfortable chair had ripened and grown, though it must be confessed that Miss Minchin and Miss Amelia knew very little about it. They were aware that Sarah was kind to the scullery maid, but they knew nothing of certain delightful moments snatched perilously when, the upstairs rooms being set in order with lightning rapidity, Sarah's sitting room was reached, and the heavy coal box set down with a sigh of joy. At such times stories were told by instalments. Things of a satisfying nature were either produced and eaten or hastily tucked into pockets to be disposed of at night, when Becky went upstairs to her attic to bed. "But I has to eat 'em careful, miss," she said once, "'cause if I leaves crumbs, the rats come out to get 'em." "Rats?" exclaimed Sarah in horror. "Are there rats there?" "Lots of 'em, miss," Becky answered in quite a matter-of-fact manner. "There mostly is rats and mice in attics. You get used to the noise they make scuttling about. I've got so I don't mind 'em so long as they don't run over my pillow." "Ugh," said Sarah. "You gets used to anything after a bit," said Becky. You have to, miss, if you're born a scullery maid. I'd rather have rats than cockroaches. So would I, said Sarah. I suppose you might make friends with a rat in time, but I don't believe I should like to make friends with a cockroach. Sometimes Becky did not dare to spend more than a few minutes in the bright, warm room, and when this was the case, perhaps only a few words could be exchanged, and a small purchase slipped into the old-fashioned pocket Becky carried under her dress skirt, tied round her waist with a band of tape. The search for, and discovery of, satisfying things to eat, which could be packed into small compass, added a new interest to Sarah's existence. When she drove or walked out, she used to look into shop windows eagerly. The first time it occurred to her to bring home 2 or 3 little meat pies, she felt she had hit upon a discovery. When she exhibited them, Becky's eyes quite sparkled. "Oh, miss," she murmured, "them will be nice and filling. It's fillingness that's best. Sponge cake's a heavenly thing, but it melts away like, if you understand, miss. These'll just stay in your stomach." "Well," hesitated Sarah, "I don't think it would be good if they stayed always, but I do believe they will be satisfying." They were satisfying, and so were beef sandwiches bought at a cook shop, and so were rolls and bologna sausage. In time, Becky began to lose her hungry, tired feeling, and the coal box did not seem so unbearably heavy. However heavy it was, and whatsoever the temper of the cook and the hardness of the work heaped upon her shoulders, she had always the chance of the afternoon to look forward to, the chance that Miss Sarah would be able to be in her sitting-room. In fact, the mere seeing of Miss Sarah would have been enough without meat pies. If there was time only for a few words, they were always friendly, merry words that put heart into one, and if there was time for more, then there was an instalment of a story to be told, or some other thing one remembered afterward, and sometimes lay awake in one's bed in the attic to think over. Sarah, who was only doing what she unconsciously liked better than anything else, nature having made her for a giver, had not the least idea what she meant to poor Becky, and how wonderful a benefactor she seemed. If nature has made you for a giver, your hands are borne open, and so is your heart, and though there may be times when your hands are empty, your heart is always full, and you can give things out of that, warm things, kind things, sweet things, help and comfort and laughter, and sometimes gay, kind laughter is the best help of all. Becky had scarcely known what laughter was through all her poor, little, hard-driven life. Sarah made her laugh, and laughed with her, and though neither of them quite knew it, the laughter was as filling as the meat pies. A few weeks before Sarah's 11th birthday, a letter came to her from her father which did not seem to be written in such boyish high spirits as usual. He was not very well, and was evidently overweighted by the business connected with the diamond mines. "You see, little Sarah," he wrote, "your daddy is not a businessman at all, and figures and documents bother him. He does not really understand them, and all this seems so enormous. Perhaps, if I was not feverish, I should not be awake, tossing about one half of the night and spend the other half in troublesome dreams. If my little missus were here, I dare say she would give me some solemn good advice. You would, Wouldn't you, little missus? One of his many jokes had been to call her his little missus, because she had such an old-fashioned air. He had made wonderful preparations for her birthday. Among other things, a new doll had been ordered in Paris, and her wardrobe was to be, indeed, a marvel of splendid perfection. When she had replied to the letter, asking if the doll would be an acceptable present, Sarah had been very quaint. "I am getting very old," she wrote. "You see, I shall never live to have another doll given me. This will be my last doll. There is something solemn about it. If I could write poetry, I'm sure a poem about a last doll would be very nice. But I cannot write poetry. I have tried, and it made me laugh. It did not sound like Watts or Coleridge or Shakespeare at all. No one could ever take Emily's place, but I should respect the last doll very much, and I am sure the school would love it. They all like dolls, though some of the big ones, the almost 15 ones, pretend they are too grown up." Captain Crewe had a splitting headache when he read this letter in his bungalow in India. The table before him was heaped with papers and letters, which were alarming him and filling him with anxious dread. But he laughed as he had not laughed for weeks. "Oh," he said, "she's better fun every year she lives. God grant this business may right itself and leave me free to run home and see her. What wouldn't I give to have her little arms round my neck this minute? What wouldn't I give?" The birthday was to be celebrated by great festivities. The schoolroom was to be decorated, and there was to be a party. The boxes containing the presents were to be opened with great ceremony, and there was to be a glittering feast spread in Miss Minchin's sacred room. When the day arrived, the whole house was in a whirl of excitement. How the morning passed nobody quite knew, because there seemed such preparations to be made. The schoolroom was being decked with garlands of holly, the desks had been moved away, and red covers had been put on the forms which were arrayed round the room against the wall. When Sarah went into her sitting room in the morning, she found on the table a small, dumpy package, tied up in a piece of brown paper. She knew it was a present, and she thought she could guess whom it came from. She opened it quite tenderly. It was a square pincushion, made of not quite clean red flannel, and black pins had been stuck carefully into it to form the words, "Many happy returns." "Oh," cried Sarah with a warm feeling in her heart, "what pains she has taken! I like it so. It makes me feel sorrowful." But the next moment she was mystified. On the underside of the pincushion was secured a card, bearing in neat letters the name Miss Amelia Minchin. Sarah turned it over and over. "Miss Amelia," she said to herself. "How can it be?" And just at that very moment she heard the door being cautiously pushed open and saw Becky peeping round it. There was an affectionate, happy grin on her face, and she shuffled forward and stood nervously pulling at her fingers. "Do you like it, Miss Sarah?" she said. "Do you?" "Like it?" cried Sarah. "You darling Becky! You made it all yourself." Becky gave a hysteric but joyful sniff, and her eyes looked quite moist with delight. "It ain't nothing but flannin, and the flannin ain't new. But I wanted to give you something, and I made it of nights. I knew you could pretend it was satin with diamond pins in. I tried to when I was making it. The card, miss, rather doubtfully. 'Twa'n't wrong of me to pick it up out of the dustbin, was it? Miss Melia had throwed it away. I hadn't no card of my own, and I knowed it wouldn't be a proper present if I didn't pen a card on. So I pinned Miss Melia's. Sarah flew at her and hugged her. She could not have told herself or anyone else why there was a lump in her throat. "Oh, Becky," she cried out with a queer little laugh. "I love you, Becky. I do. I do." "Oh, miss," breathed Becky. "Thank you, miss, kindly. It ain't good enough for that. The flannin wasn't new." Thank you for listening. Lovely stuff. Absolutely lovely stuff. I really hope you enjoyed that chapter. I'm sorry that there will only be one chapter in this part, but like I mentioned last time, the next one, chapter 7, which will be The Diamond Mines again, is one of the longest in this book, so I just didn't think it would quite work to combine chapter 6, which was a little bit of a longer one by A Little Princess standards anyway, then with what is, like I said, one of the very longest in the book. So next time we will just be having chapter 7, but it's a good one. I promise you will enjoy it, I think. And I have to say, this dynamic with Sarah and Becky, it's lovely, and I particularly enjoy when Frances Hodgson Burnett touches on certain topics. I think I enjoy certain aspects more than others. And this reflection, even from an incredibly privileged perspective, I do find interesting, important, heartwarming certainly, and sort of more relatable in some aspects when they're touching on this sort of ordinary life that we see here. I mean, in this context, and this is often the case with some of the classics, or many of the classics and various pieces of literature, films and TV and things, I feel that the ordinary person, the average person out there, is sort of depicted as unusual in a sense, even though someone like Becky would be incredibly normal in this period, and in many ways I think many of us out there would relate closer to Becky than we would with Sarah or many of the other characters in a book like this, and that's something that I particularly enjoy with The Secret Garden as well, when we meet Dickon and his family, extended family, Ben Weatherstaff, and these sorts of characters. I think that's really wonderful. And when the author touches on these more sort of reflective notes in general, I particularly enjoy that when we're delving into people's minds, just touching on little nuggets that allow us to think along more philosophical lines and things, which again is a very common theme in The Secret Garden, and I feel that here as well with The Little Princess. But just in terms of pure entertainment, I've got to say I really find these scenes with Lottie to be an awful lot of fun. This little back and forth with Lavinia and Lottie and Lavinia's friend, I thought was, is it Jessie? I thought was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed those aspects. From a reader's point of view, it's just very amusing. So yeah, I really hope you're enjoying this one. And before I go, one thing was that I just want to thank my new channel member, and that is Lightweaver. So thank you ever so much for joining my channel, becoming an official Fox fan, and just pledging a little bit of support there through YouTube. Thank you, as always, to all of my patrons over on Patreon. And I just wanted, with there just being one chapter today, I just wanted to show you the other books from this very special Puffin in Bloom collection as well. So I will start with this one, as you have seen the bookmark many times. This collection also comes with Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. It's very shiny, so it's quite hard to show this to you. But as I've mentioned many times, these illustrations by Anna Bond are really charming. And also, as you can see, it's an absolute beast, this book, Little Women. Before buying this collection with A Little Princess and these other stories, I had no idea actually how huge that book was, so I think that will be quite a difficult one to produce if I do get around to it. The main contender for the story that I will read after A Little Princess, so as you know, I'm also working on the Sherlock Holmes stories now as well, so there's sort of two different themes going on. We've got these sort of more calm and cozy. It's not necessarily that the books themselves are utterly calm and cozy or anything, but going for this more calm and cozy audiobook experience, reading from the book with this sort of raw reading style that I've termed in the past. And then we've also got the audiobook soundscape series with a bit more of a nitty gritty, I don't think more professional and polished quite suits. I've often described how I've looked at certain series as sort of more polished and produced, and then these raw reading ones as less so, but they're more just different. they're more different in the style. But with Sherlock Holmes, like with some other series, the focus is really on the voice acting and the atmosphere and feeling of the book itself. And then with this series that you're watching here, it's more of the atmosphere of the video and the whole package that I'm trying to focus on. And then the fourth one, I didn't even mention the name there, I don't think. So the major contender for the next after A Little Princess is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. And this is a story that many people have been requesting, so I think you'll be happy to see this book in front of the camera. And the fourth book of this series is one that I'm not actually familiar with at all. I mean, I've looked it up now, but it wasn't a book I was familiar with before receiving this collection, and that is Heidi by Joanna Spyri. So if you know anything about Heidi, if it's a favourite of yours, do let me know. And then the outside contender, I mean, it's a book that I've been wanting to narrate for a very long time, actually. But I'm just not sure if it'll be best for this sort of format or for a format more similar to Dracula or Jekyll and Hyde or something like that, is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I'm also very interested in reading Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And these authors spent a lot of time in a beautiful little town in West Yorkshire called Haworth, which I visited many times over the years. Absolutely beautiful place. And one of the main reasons that I would like to read this story is not only because I think it's a lovely story and a very famous one, but it's also because there's quite a lot of Yorkshire in it. And for those of you that enjoyed Secret Garden, I think you'd have a right good time with some proper Yorkshire in Wuthering Heights. So that's one that I would really like to read, but I think it will probably, if I was to put it up to the vote, I think Anne of Green Gables would probably just nip ahead there and win the vote, but I probably will do that. So look out for a poll, a vote coming sometime over the next few weeks, because when I'm nearing the end of A Little Princess, that was my plan, really, was to put it out to you and see what you would like to hear next and to see next. Someone was I was just thinking of some nice moments from A Little Princess as well, with the different voices. Like the voice acting aspect is not something I'm worrying about too much in this reading. I mean, it's still there, absolutely. But someone had commented on the voice of Lavinia, saying that it reminded them of Draco Malfoy, and that was absolutely spot on. I was actually very much modelling my Lavinia on how I used to read Malfoy when I was producing my unofficial Harry Potter audiobooks a year or two or more ago. And you know, Harry Potter and A Little Princess do have something in common with this boarding school environment, and it feels like there's always going to be a Malfoy in there, and it just felt like Lavinia was the one. So definitely a little crossover with how I'm voicing those two characters. Okay, well, thank you so very much again for joining me today. I really hope you're enjoying this little book and other things that I'm working on as well. And don't forget that you can go, if you go into my channel, go into the playlists section or the videos section, have a little browse around there. There are many things that I've been working on that are still up on my channel. So obviously I have had to remove a few different projects, unfortunately, because of copyright restrictions and things like that. But there is still a lot of material out there on my channel, and there might be certain things that you've missed. So do have a little browse around, see what other fun stuff you can find. And there might be certain stories that I've read live in my Red Fox Book Club live streams that you might have missed as well. So have a little browse around. And those of you that support me on Patreon, you can access downloadable audio libraries through my Patreon as well. So don't forget about that if you have Patreon access. And if you're not a supporter of mine on Patreon, do consider just a little bit of support on there. It's a wonderful way of just saying thanks. If you're enjoying my content here on YouTube, you know that you're helping to support this content being made, and you can also get early access to new content. There's always that sort of behind the scenes exclusive community aspect, and I think a lot of you would probably say one of the major perks are those downloadable audio libraries as well. So thank you very much for today. You take care wherever you are. I do love the sound of these books. And I will read to you soon.